Welcome to the Fireside Chat. My name is Claudia Steffens. I'm the Manager of Strategic Partnerships for Bechtel Corporation. We are excited and honored to have the opportunity to co-host this event with SHPE today. 2020 has been a dynamic year of change and challenges, as we all know. This year's theme, Ascend to Transcend, certainly addresses that reality. We have all had to pivot, keeping ascending in both our personal and professional lives, and we are grateful to SHPE for pivoting to a virtual conference so that we could continue our long tradition of partnering together to bring insights and advice to SHPE members in the Latinx community. Today, I am honored to introduce two amazing professionals, Raquel Tamez, CEO of SHPE, and Brendan Bechtel, CEO of Bechtel. Just a few housekeeping items before I turn it over to Raquel and Brendan. Today's conversation is being kept, so we'll take a breath. You'll get a chance to listen into a dialogue between two important leaders in the engineering industry. We save time at the end for you to be able to ask questions, and we're hoping for it to be lively and interesting conversation, so you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So please make sure you do that. While we may not have time to get to everyone's questions individually, we'll monitor the chat and look for questions with similar themes, and you don't have to wait till the end of the session to ask your question. So feel free throughout the conversation to run over to the chat or to type your questions in for the Q&A. Thanks for joining us, and now I'll turn it over to Raquel to introduce herself. So Raquel?
Thanks, Claudia. I am super excited to be here today. Welcome, everyone, and a big thank you to Bechtel, a longtime steadfast supporter of SHPE, and I am excited to have this conversation with Brendan. I've been asked to introduce myself and talk a little bit about my career trajectory. I've been with SHPE 3.5 years now, and before that, I was a lawyer. When I look back at my career and fast forward it to date, it seems to me that I've either been on a mission or I've been a part of a mission. Started off as a trial lawyer for the U.S. Department of Labor, protecting worker and employee rights. And then I went in-house counsel for Mary Kay Cosmetics and managed 35 international subsidiaries. And my work there was all about the empowerment of women around the world. And then I went into technology at ACS and then CSC, managing the global litigation as Deputy General Counsel. And during that part in my career, it was all about women lawyers and Latina lawyers. And then my position before SHPE was as the General Counsel and Chief Legal Officer at Source America. And Source America is a national nonprofit whose mission is all about the creation of employment opportunities for persons with significant disabilities. And now here I am with SHPE, all about the education and the empowerment of Hispanics and people of color in STEM. So moving to SHPE was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my career. And so Brendan, I'm going to take it over, turn over to you and ask you to talk about your career, because it's been a very interesting one as well.
Oh, thanks for the nice introduction, Raquel. I'm so excited to be here with you and all the SHPE members that are on and watching today. And I'm most excited to get to all of their direct questions. So I'm going to just kind of blast through my intro. My bio's online if anybody wants to take a look at it. It's short by design. We're not really big on talking about ourselves at Bechtel. I would just say I was really lucky to grow up on projects overseas as a little kid, as my dad was coming up in the business. A not well-known fact about me is that at age 3, I lived in a trailer in the jungle in Borneo, in Indonesia, in the middle of the jungle. And my 1-year-old brother and I were the only kids in the construction camp. My dad was the piping superintendent on an LNG project. And there was no one else for us to play with in the construction camp, but some neighbors in the camp had adopted an orangutan, which had been wounded in a car accident. And so my brother and I grew up playing with an orangutan that wore diapers, so we thought it was sort of one of us. So if I ever have an issue with my table manners, I always say, Mom, you did raise us with a monkey, so it's sort of, it's not really my problem. But so that's a good segue into, the rest of my professional career was not too dissimilar. So I had the opportunity, starting working summers at Bechtel at 14, to travel around the world, assignments in the field, assignments in the office. Everything from writing our corporate sustainability strategy to being a safety manager on a project to being a construction superintendent, field engineer, lived and worked in West Africa and Australia, all over the United States, and really have had the opportunity to experience most of the different functions within our company and most of the different parts of our business. By far, the best part of this job is all the people that I get to work with. They're just incredible. So that's why I'm so fired up to be with you all today. And I think with that, enough about me. I'm going to start by asking Raquel some questions about SHPE and why SHPE is such a great organization and the difference they're making right now, and give you some insight into why companies like Bechtel are so proud to partner with SHPE. So with that, let's dive in, and I'll ask Raquel some questions, and she'll answer, then we'll switch roles, and she'll ask me. And in the meantime, hopefully we're giving all of you out there in the ether the opportunity to have enough context to ask us some really good questions. So Raquel, 2020 is a year like we've never seen before. So I have a friend who sent me an image of someone they saw in the street wearing a T-shirt that said, 2020, and then on a 1 to 5 scale, they circled 1 and said not recommended. So it's been a year unlike anything we've seen before. Tell us a little bit about how this has changed the needs of your members and how SHPE has been responding.
Well, overall, it's been a major pivot. We've had events that have been canceled. For example, this past fiscal year, we had 4 of our 7 regional leadership development conferences canceled. We've had to go completely 100% remote distributed as far as our team, 100% virtual with respect to our leadership conference, for our chapter leaders. And now here, our convention, setting up a convention virtually for 10,000 people is what we expect is a huge undertaking. But the needs of my members, of SHPE members, are essentially the same and then amplified, right? So we are trying to meet our members where they are. And there's a lot of uncertainty as to where they are. 80% of our members are students with 20% professionals. As you know, going back to school is up in the air, depending on the school, depending on the city, depending on the state. And so we're trying to work with our chapters on campus to keep them engaged. We're trying to provide, and I'd like to think that my team has responded, in providing more virtual experiences and digital resources. But most importantly, it's financial support, academic financial support. We've been doing that through scholarships, but also COVID-related support for financial hardship. So we set up an all-in relief fund. Bechtel was one of the seed partners for that, so thank you. And I think overall, I'd like to think that SHPE, we communicate and we communicate consistently, but now we have to communicate more, even more, and more comprehensively. But most importantly, I think it's actually engaging our members in crucial conversations. We had crucial conversations with our members about Black Lives Matter, about going virtual for our convention, the pricing of our convention. So really having those crucial conversations and effective communications. But my team has been amazing. We're a small team. There's 20 of us. And we put on 9 signature events every year. And now they all have to be transitioned to virtual. But I'd like to think that my team and myself, along with the board of directors, is continuing to bring value to our members.
Thanks, Raquel. So now as you're like 2.5, 3 years into leading the organization, considering that the Hispanic and Latinx community is one of the fastest growing demographics, not just in the US, but in the world, what do you see as the greatest challenge to supporting members with career advocacy and preparing themselves for careers in engineering? What are the biggest challenges that you all are facing?
Sure. So not only are Hispanics the fastest growing demographic, right? We're the majority minority. We are 18% of the U.S. workforce right now. We will be 30% of the U.S. workforce in 2060. The challenges are essentially the same, and then again, like my previous answer, sort of amplified. Although we're graduating from high school at higher numbers than any other racial group, we're entering higher education, university and colleges at higher numbers than any other racial group. We're entering STEM studies higher numbers. It's persistence, right? That's an academic term. We're entering STEM studies, but not necessarily graduating with STEM degrees. And a lot of it has to do with financial or lack of financial support. It's amazing to me that the financial assistance process is still so ambiguous and daunting. So we try to help parents and families navigate that through Noche de Ciencias, which is SHPE's community engagement program. It happens all year long across the U.S. in collaboration between student chapters, professional chapters, local educators, and civic leaders. And we bring in entire families to address the two main barriers for Hispanics entering STEM: awareness and access. Awareness. Our Hispanic parents know that STEM is important. They've heard of STEM. They may not necessarily know all of the different opportunities, and more importantly, the possibilities. So we bring awareness about what STEM is in engineering. We have hands-on activities. And then we also talk about access. Well, how do you access studies in STEM? How do you access a career in STEM? And these workshops are essentially bilingual, and we said it's across the U.S. that we do these programs. But financial support is a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge. I think, too, that Hispanics in STEM need more mentors, and they need more role models. And we do that as well at SHPE through our mentorship program. I think once Hispanics enter a STEM career, I think it's working with the companies that hire SHPE members and working with them and setting them up for success and ensuring that they are not only groomed to succeed and to advance and be promoted, but that they're supported along the entire career and their careers. So we do that through SHPE in partnership with companies like Bechtel. So we're not just the premier resource for talent. We are that, and we've been that for 46 years, but we partner with our industry partners on the retention portion. We're the resource, and then we support retention. So I think it's really looking to support professionals in their career and along their career trajectory to positions of leadership, because we need more Hispanics in leadership roles, and we need to see them in all the centers of power, which right now when you look at our population numbers, the representation of leaders is not there. So SHPE still has work to do, and thankfully we have partnerships with companies like Bechtel.
Thanks, Raquel. You answered most of. I had two other questions I was going to ask you, but you answered them so eloquently. And I was really interested in what you thought we as employers need to do more of. And I would just have to echo that. That I think you're right. I think retention and role models, it's a wonderful way to frame it. And we get so much value from SHPE as an employer and helping us be better at that. maybe last question for you, Raquel, before you turn it around on me. But for there's a lot of students and graduates in the audience today. One of my favorite questions to ask other leaders always is, what do you know now that you wish you'd known at the beginning of your career? Any just sort of broader tactical or strategic advice for people just beginning their careers that knowing what you know now, you tell them to keep in mind?
Yes. I think, when I started my career, I remember my father telling me, Raquel, you're not there to be everybody's best friend. You're there to be an excellent lawyer. And no doubt, and I tell SHPE members that all the time, you must be an excellent engineer. You must be an excellent scientist, an excellent technologist, and you happen to be Hispanic, right? But first and foremost, you must be excellent in everything you do. A mentor of mine, and I wish I had known this earlier in my career, he said, Raquel, relationships are the currency of the workplace. And I couldn't agree more. Now that I look at my career now and I look back at my career, no doubt, relationships are the currency of the workforce. So there is truth in the adage that it's not what you know, it's who you know. And more importantly, it's not just who you know, it's who knows you. And so that takes me to another point about how we define humility. I don't sign up for the type of humility that I think some people, subscribe to. Being subservient somehow, not, rocking the boat and just nose to the grindstone. I think we need to redefine humility, and it needs to look more like ambitious humility. It's important for any young person to really toot their own horn, just don't blow it by bragging and boasting. It has to be a nice measure of taking pride in what you're doing and those stretch assignments that you ask for, and sharing that with people that need to know. So those would be the three pieces. Be excellent, nurture your relationships, and practice ambitious humility. So Brendan, I have all kinds of questions for you. If, engineers starting their careers now, they have a lot of options, right? You look at SHPE's industry partners, we've got a near 50. If you were trying to convince a young person to go into engineering, procurement, construction, like Bechtel, what would you tell them? Bechtel versus like a Google or a Facebook. Help the listeners out there, the viewers out there, understand why they should consider a company like Bechtel.
Well, I really appreciate the softball recruiting opportunity. So thank you. I live this because I participate actively in our recruiting at colleges and universities. And frequently what we're finding is that we are competing with tech companies for the best engineers. Frankly, that's a wonderful problem to have for engineering graduates. So, I would say power to you. It's a great problem to have different industries competing for young talent. So my answer would be, if we're doing our jobs correctly at Bechtel, you don't have to choose between a career in tech or a career in engineering construction. And the reason I say that is because we need engineers who are eager to explore things like big data, like how we're going to apply artificial intelligence to the way that we put together projects, how we can use robotic process automation, or even robots doing construction in the field in the way that we do our work. We are right now investing really heavily at Bechtel through this down cycle. We're investing heavily in transforming the way that we do business with a focus on digital project execution. And all I can tell you from being inside the effort on this right now is we're going to look really different as a company hopefully faster than the industry looks, but the industry is going to look really different a decade from now. And but I would say there's a fundamental difference between going and working for a tech company or a company like ours, in that at the end of the day, the work that we've done at a company like Bechtel or any of your other member companies that support SHIP is that we're building solutions for key challenges in the physical built environment in the 21st century. So our projects lift up communities through infrastructure that it creates access to services and opportunity. It's transit, it's power, it's digital connectivity, things you can actually physically touch. That people can physically interact with in a way that that frankly all these technology companies are enabling the work that we're doing. But I would say, if you're thinking about who to go work for, as part of your own due diligence, ask a lot of questions about what is their strategy for digital. Make sure they've got a good, compelling strategy with substance to it, not just a bunch of arm waving. Because any engineering construction company that's not digital savvy and investing, that this isn't the single biggest area of investment for them right now, may not be around in 5 to 10 years, in my view.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely key. And I want to iterate it for our viewers to ask the question of the companies that you're researching, the companies you're interviewing with. What is your digital transformation strategy? What is your digital determination? And the fact that Bechtel is building and the outcomes are real and have positive impacts on individuals and communities around the world. That is so exciting. And what I say is every company is a tech company. We all have to be technologists these days and tech savvy. It's the Internet of Things, of all things, right? So I noted, Brendan, on the Bechtel website that it says opportunity is everywhere. I love that. Where do you see the most opportunity for growth within the Bechtel workforce? Because, hey, we've got lots of viewers out there and they're looking seriously at Bechtel. So where do you see the most opportunity for growth within the Bechtel workforce?
Yeah, so Raquel, I would say it's everything I just said, which is helping. It's helping us think about what a digital version, a more digital savvy version of Bechtel looks like in the future. So someone who's got a mix of mechanical engineering as well as some background in data science. That's a really interesting combination to us when we're recruiting right now, because we think that the work of the future is going to be pretty different. It'll be less siloed. It'll be less discipline by discipline. It'll be more integrated. The more rote part of some of the engineering tasks will be automated with machine learning. But we still need people who understand the fundamentals and the principles and can put it all together. But we very much believe in a future where we're never going to have machines completely displace human thought and judgment and integration. So we very much believe in and are investing in a sort of person plus machine future where machine learning and AI is enabling people, frankly, to spend more time on the really fun, value-add, creative problem-solving parts of our work. But specifically, the growth for people who are joining Bechtel, I would say we're always looking out for, and we promote within Bechtel engineers who are seeking to become more well-rounded. They're putting in the effort required to grow. They've got not just the technical engineering skills that provide the foundation of competence and excellence that you talked about, but increasingly a focus on what people I think mislabel as softer skills. I don't like calling them soft because they're really hard. They're hard to do. It's being innovative. It's big picture thinking. It's zooming in and out between detail and big picture. It's collaborating, which now we're all learning to do. Those of us that weren't comfortable doing it remotely and virtually, we're getting better at that. It's knowing how to engage and lead a diverse group of people. It's about having the ability to make decisions based on data, but still not being afraid to come up with concrete recommendations and exercise judgment and actually make a decision, because time is the enemy of most things when it comes to engineering and construction. So, we take great pride, and the thing I'm most proud of is how we develop people at Bechtel. But, I got to imagine there's a bunch of, relatively young graduates on the call. And one of the pieces of advice I always give new grads is learning to do this is hard and it takes time, and experience has to be earned. You have to accumulate experience to develop judgment. So, becoming a project manager at Bechtel, when you're running a $10 billion project, it takes decades to learn the diverse set of skills required to be operating at that level. But look, a basic rule of thumb: if any of you that are watching, if you show up and you demonstrate a willingness to learn new skills, if you demonstrate a profound desire for feedback, particularly feedback that makes you better, if you're up for confronting and tackling new challenges, including you need to have a space to make mistakes and learn from that. I think all these characteristics will resonate with everybody. Now, our job as an employer is to offer you those opportunities to grow your skills and to work through those challenges. Your job is to say yes when we ask you to go to where the action is. Or I was going to say this for later, but I'll save it now. If you remember one thing from my talk today, the most important thing to remember is that when you're not sure what to do in your career, always chase the steepest learning curve that you can get on. And that will, as a rule of thumb, that will always help you accumulate the experiences and the relationships like Raquel talked about, but the experiences and the competency and the judgment to position you well for whatever's next.
Absolutely. I love your comment about, experimenting and going for that challenge. I oftentimes say, take that calculated risk. Lifelong learning, being curious, learning new skills, being open to feedback for sure, and not just. I would add not just being willing to say yes to a new job assignment, but asking for stretch assignments too, and being thoughtful about those, because it really is about those experiences and taking those calculated risks. You mentioned the partnership between SHIP and Bechtel. Bechtel is one of SHIP's industry partners. Bechtel supports and advocates for diversity and inclusion in the workforce. It's demonstrated. On the website, it also says that the company's success is attributed to dynamic, diverse, mobile, high-performance teams. Let's talk a little bit more about why you think diversity and inclusion is important, and how Bechtel goes about continuously fueling the talent pipeline with diverse talent, in addition to its partnership with SHIP.
Great. Thanks, Raquel. Yeah, I would start by, to borrow your earlier term, I would start by being ambitiously humble and acknowledging that we, like most big companies in our industry, have huge gaps with respect to the diversity of our workforce, and particularly how our leadership reflects the diversity of our workforce. And then we also have an issue with inclusion, and it's something that it haunts our whole industry. But that's not an excuse. Saying that this is an industry problem lets us off the hook of accountability. So we've tried to be much more ambitious about what we're going to do about it. So in June, in the wake of a lot of learning internally about privilege and race and inequity and injustice, we made a very public commitment to accelerate our efforts to become more diverse and inclusive. We committed as a leadership team to be anti-racist. We had a lot of education about what that meant, what's required of us as leaders, and what's required of everybody in a leadership role in our company to actually do that well. But we're totally committed to being anti-racist, to having the felt experience of working at Bechtel, that you're empowered to help create a more just and equitable society. We had incredibly moving virtual town halls with, it was the most attended virtual town hall we've ever done. I co-hosted a session on race and privilege. And we heard from our colleagues, and we heard directly how the felt experience of working at Bechtel differed depending on whether you were, depending on your definition of gender, depending on your race or ethnicity, depending on which generation you came from, depending if you were an engineer or non-engineer. It really started the process of healing and being comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. But the reason why I'm so passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion, Raquel, is because it's not, there's a moral imperative around it, but it's about making our company stronger. So diversity of thinking is the thing around which our whole approach to governance and good decision-making at Bechtel hinges. So if a decision who is accountable, if a decision maker leader is accountable for a decision that they've got the authority to make, they have an obligation to surround themselves with the most diverse input and thinking that they possibly can before they make a big, far-reaching, potentially life-altering decision when you think about safety and how we plan and manage our work. So to me, it's like we need those diverse perspectives in the room all the time to make sure that we're challenging the status quo. And the status quo when it comes to DE&I in our industry needs change aggressively. So I would say we're humble about how much work we've got to do, and we're ambitious about what we're going to do about it. But I don't want anyone to take my word for it. I want you to talk to your colleagues who work at Bechtel, find out what it's really like. But we're trying. I would say, specifically, we're looking in different places for talent than we used to, and so we've made access to diverse student bodies a bigger, more heavily weighted criteria when we select partner schools that we work with. We're actually doing a good job, to your earlier comments about how you all as SHPE support employers. We're hiring diverse candidates into Bechtel coming out of universities in larger proportion than they're actually graduating. So our intake is pretty good. We then have a retention problem, Raquel, and this is where SHPE adds a lot of value. Is somewhere in the first 5 years of their career at Bechtel, we are fumbling the ball and making them feel fully included and providing the opportunity they signed up for. One of the ways that we're doing that is, we've learned a lot from remote work, and we were really resistant to it. We thought it would impact productivity. We said, we don't know how to inculcate our Bechtel culture into people working remotely. Well, we've had to figure it out, and frankly, it's going to be a while until everything gets back to normal. So we're figuring it out. But if more of our positions are open to telework, that allows us to access talent in different places than in our established offices and project locations. So that's pretty exciting. And I would say one of the other things, and this is where SHPE's been a great partner with sustaining scholarships through the pandemic. And as a company, that's inspired us to do things like, a lot of companies canceled their summer internship programs. We refused to do it. We said, okay, it's got to be virtual. We might shorten it so that students have the ability to do something else in addition. But we proceeded with all our internships that we'd offered people. We shortened them a bit. We gave participants an overview of the global enterprise, and then we gave them specific activities by discipline. But it was pretty neat. They actually got a broader perspective on Bechtel by doing it virtually than they would have done probably if they'd just gone and done the original internship. And then last on this, I would just say, I'd encourage everybody to visit our virtual booth at some point during the convention and really please poke and prod at us about what we're doing on diverse talent. And I want you to challenge us, challenge our recruiters, challenge whether we're doing everything we can.
Yeah, I like that. And, viewers out there, do ask those tough questions. And I really appreciate how candid you've been, Brendan, with your response about admitting that Bechtel has some gaps and some opportunities and the need for more diverse leadership, but that you're having those crucial conversations and that you're listening to your talent.
Yeah.
And SHPE is committed to our partnership in collaborating and co-creating with Bechtel so that we can address the retention issue, because Bechtel is not alone. You know, all those tech companies out there, they're constantly being beat up because, yes, they spend millions and millions of dollars recruiting awesome talent, but then they can't keep the talent. And so the retention issue continues to be a concern. But the fact that we have proven that distributed remote teams works, I think we can tap in to more people of color, more diversity, and the data and the science is out there that diverse and inclusive workplaces are more innovative, and inclusive teams actually reduce risk. So I'm not making that up. There's data, there's research, there's science out there. But I commend you and Bechtel on your efforts, and just know that SHPE remains committed to working with you on your retention and your advancement and promotion of Hispanics and people of color within Bechtel. Because I can tell you, as a trial lawyer, working in representing enforcement agencies like OSHA and investigating companies like Bechtel, I was oftentimes the only woman and the only person of color in the room. So I get it. We still need lots of work to do, but we're getting it done. Brendan, this is probably one of the final questions, so we can get to the audience Q&A. But you have such deep roots in engineering and construction. You mentioned you're, growing up in Borneo in the jungle in a trailer. So not only are you the fifth generation to run Bechtel, to lead Bechtel, but you started with the company working in summer breaks. We've talked about internships. You also have a master's degree in construction, engineering and management. If there was one piece of advice that you would give a SHPE student member out there on how to succeed in school, what would that be?
So I'll do that, and then I'm actually going to crowdsource my answer by highlighting some of my Bechtel colleagues who are wonderful examples of the partnership that SHPE and Bechtel create. And so I'm gonna volunteer them as points of contact for additional career advice, specifically about what it takes to succeed at Bechtel. But I mentioned it before. My biggest thing is when you come to a fork in the road about what to do with your career or which professional development opportunities to go for, when in doubt, just always chase the steepest learning curve that you can find. And our business requires people to move around the world. That can be very painful sometimes, with real personal sacrifice to make that happen. But if it's in pursuit of the steepest learning curve, and the reason why I always promote that is if you focus on accumulating experience rather than titles, if you focus on filling in gaps in your experience and skills that make you more versatile, you're always going to be a franchise player. You're always going to be in high demand. You will force yourself to learn to adapt as job skills change and needs change over time. That's always a really good investment. Now, I just want to highlight a couple of my colleagues who are, outspoken SHPE members and have helped make sure that this partnership goes so well. And so I want to mention their names and call them out and thank them in front of their peers and colleagues here, so that if any of you in the convention ever come across them, I hope you reach out. So first is Benjamin Gonzalez. Benjamin's a project engineering designer in OG&C. So, project engineers in Bechtel's world are the ones who have to integrate all of the different disciplines. So it's really tricky. So Benjamin, thank you. Benjamin's the president of the SHPE Houston professional chapter and was just recently featured in the SHPE social media campaign for Hispanic Heritage Month. So really proud, Benjamin, that you got to represent us in that. Jerry Romero, who's a construction field engineer on our AT&T mobility project, where we're building out the next generation of telecoms wireless support for AT&T. Jerry began as a SHPE intern his freshman year in university, became a vice president and ultimately president of his local chapter. And now he's currently on the board of the SHPE Orange County chapter. So Jerry, thanks for your work at Bechtel. Thanks for your leadership roles in the local SHPE chapters. Layla Fadakar, former Bechtel intern turned construction engineer in corporate EPC functions here in the Washington, D.C. area. We always love when we have interns who become full-time, and then not only that, but are now working in the headquarters, helping define work processes of the future for our company. So Layla, that's awesome. Layla was the president of the SHPE chapter at University of Maryland in 2019 and 2020, and then just recently joined the SHPE DC professional chapter. So again, there's this wonderful, as you talked about, Raquel, there's this really awesome experience of being a SHPE member and contributor in university, and then the professional chapters which support you once you're out in the real world working and need support and mentorship and advocacy. And then last on my list is Javier Moya, who's the project controls lead for the whole AT&T mobility program. So we're managing tens of thousands of smaller projects, and Javier is managing the project controls for the whole thing. Javier has been engaged with SHPE for more than 15 years, including board roles in Houston and DC, and now with the Silicon Valley chapter. So, just proof that at companies like Bechtel, SHPE makes a really material, real difference in helping us find and retain and develop and motivate and inspire Hispanic and Latinx recruits, helps us be a better workplace for those recruits when they join us, makes us better overall as a company, supports our colleagues through their SHPE professional chapters once they join a company. So it's like a win-win-win-win from my perspective. So whatever a double win-win is, it's awesome. And so with that, Raquel, I'll hand it back to you and I think Kellie to open it up for questions.
Yeah, it's win to infinity. But Benjamin, Jerry, Layla, and Javier, they're leaders within the SHPE ecosystem. They're people know them and they're highly respected. And I love that Bechtel grooms their interns and supports them in their career trajectory. The Bechtel familia and the SHPE familia is one big familia. And I love that your reference to pursue the steepest learning curve. And it's so poignant because our theme for the convention is ascend to transcend. So how do you ascend those challenges? And then how do you take it to a whole nother holistic level of transcendence? And so I very much have enjoyed this conversation. There's so much more I could say and so much more I could ask you. But I think Kellie wants to get to the questions, and I'm sure there are going to be awesome questions from the audience. So Kellie, take it from here.
Okay, great conversation. We have a lot of enthusiasm in the chat, so I'll jump right in. The first question is for Brendan. How did your educational background as an engineer uniquely position you and prepare you for your role as CEO?
Great. So I have a confession to make, which is I am formally trained as an engineer, but only after recovering as a liberal artist. And I joke with that. I joke about that because it's actually proof of my earlier advice that to constantly be looking ways to round out and diversify your own experience and skill set. So I studied geography and environmental studies in university. I went to a small school by design. I focused on using geography as a way to understand the sustainability impacts of companies like Bechtel and our customers around the world, to prepare myself to lead what I hope is the most sustainable company in our sector, and to be able to get really specific about what that means for how we approach our customers and markets and our company. But then I realized, again, to this notion of competence and earning people's trust and respect, that to lead a company of engineers, to earn the respect and build the following required to be effective in our industry. When I went back to grad school, I said, I've been learning field engineering. Everything I learned about engineering up through my mid-20s, I learned out in the field on projects, but I didn't have any formal engineering training. And so I decided to stay for another year of grad school and get a master's at the Civil Engineering School at Stanford. And it was a great experience, to actually go through the book learning to learn the hard engineering skills that I had kind of learned through osmosis and in the field, but to validate that my Bechtel experience had taught me the right way to do things was a really important, enabling, empowering thing for me. We in the warm up for this, Raquel was talking about some of the other speakers and how they've been vulnerable. I would tell you that until I went and got my formal engineering training, I felt like it was imposter syndrome. I sort of felt like I didn't want people to find out that I didn't have an engineering degree. And when I had actually gone and done it, it took that fear away, and it allowed me to fully be myself and be authentic in how I showed up and work. And that's the most important thing. That's what inclusion's all about for me. You got to be able to bring your full self to work. And so my Bechtel colleagues on the call know I sort of have fun with it. And I say, unfortunately, you've got the CEO who is trained to think non-linearly on one side of its brain and very linearly on the other. And so we'll see what happens. But so enough said on that.
Great.
By the way,
so
just to close out that question, I get asked a lot when I speak to new hires at Bechtel, if you were to go back and make different career decisions or career development decisions, is there a regret or a mistake that you think you made that you'd go back and do differently? And the only thing I would do differently is I wish I had done the required coursework and done everything to become a certified professional engineer. I just think that's a third party. That's a third-party certification of competence that's earned that no one can ever assail, that is hard-earned, and I wish I had done it.
Brendan, that's like really cerebral. Like when people ask me, like, what would you do if you could go back? I'd be a boxing commentator. I love heavyweight boxing, but I know that that's not realistic, which is why I didn't become a mountain biker professionally when I was in law school. I pursued law school instead, but I think I would be a marine biologist. But like engineering, law school also teaches you how to think and be a critical thinker and be solution oriented. So I appreciate that you went back, and I'm not a proponent of the imposter syndrome, but I'm going to springboard off of what you said, because you identified a gap in your knowledge, and then you did something about it, right? I hesitate when people, especially because I think imposter syndrome is really used a lot for women and people of color, that somehow we have this syndrome or this affliction. I think it's natural for people to have doubts about themselves and doubts about their knowledge. That's human, that's natural. I think as long as you're keeping tabs on what those gaps are and you're trying to close those, address those gaps, close those gaps. But you went and did something about it, and I'm not sure you're going around and calling yourself an imposter or sort of marinating in that. And so I just want to put it out there to the viewers that there's a lot of these panels and discussions about imposter syndrome. I think it's a bunch of bunk. I think it's okay to have doubts about what you know and what you don't know, and then identify those gaps and work at it. But then ultimately get comfortable that you're going to have gaps, that you're not always going to know everything, and get comfortable with that. Do what you can about it, and then move on. Just my 2 cents.
Okay, our next question is for Brendan as well. Bechtel is known for its culture. How are you thinking about sharing the Bechtel culture with new employees as we continue forward in this virtual environment?
It's a great question. First, I'm really proud to hear that, I'm grateful to hear that that's what we're known for, because that's what we aspire to be known for. I think that and by the way, I would just want to echo what I said before, which is I think our culture is great. I think that part of the reason why we have a diversity and inclusion problem at Bechtel, or gap, is because it has to do with our culture. The same thing that is a strength is a source of weakness. And so we're actually, this year, we'll be doing, as we do every 5 to 10 years, we'll be doing a refresh of our vision, values, and covenants, which those are like our commandments that we hang on the wall that we consecrate people's behavior around and that we use for promotion and hiring. And so you can absolutely bet that diversity and equity inclusion will be even more emphasized in the next version of those than they are today. So how do we create that sense of culture and belonging? Because it's both those things, right? The thing that makes people want to buy into the culture is it's something that they want to belong to. And again, it goes back to inclusion and making people feel included, which is why we try to not be so prescriptive in our vision, values, and covenants, which, by the way, you can go on to Bechtel.com/VVC for vision, values, and covenants to see what they are. And we deliberately exercise self-restraint and not being too specific or prescriptive because we want them to resonate with people's personal values, which means we have to leave room in how we define our desired culture so that people can bring all of themselves into it and that they can see themselves in it and they can interpret it in ways that feel authentic for them based on their experiences and perspectives. So, the challenge of doing that, it's really hard to do that when someone joins and starts a role virtually. And so all I would say is we experimented with doing that this year with our interns. It's the first time we ever had a full cohort of new hires whose entire existence from beginning through returning back to school was all virtual. And so I would actually say, I don't know if any of them are on, but their perspective on how well we did or didn't do that would be the most telling. But I think the thing that's the same, no matter whether it's virtual or in person, is the way that you get people to actually buy into your culture and that you're serious about it is you provide visible consequences that reinforce it. And so, we have a belief that the VVNC and all the things that they say only drive 20% of people's behavior because really, really smart people, like the people that I get to call my colleagues at Bechtel, they watch. And if they see a promotion announcement that I've signed and announced to the organization, and someone's been promoted who is not an exemplar of our values, then I have just lost all credibility, and we have undermined our own commitment to those values. And so every big decision that every leader at Bechtel makes, they run through their mental model, their interpretation of the vision, values, and covenants, and stress test it against, is this decision I'm about to make, is it reinforcing the covenants or is it undermining it? And you can do that virtually or in person.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge, right? Culture. Who is the organizational guru that says culture eats strategy for lunch, right? And how do you recreate culture in a virtual world, in a virtual reality where our teams are remote and distributed? But I think it is doable, and I think the fact that you started to look at that, and it would be interesting to see what your interns said. It makes me think of my experience at Mary Kay. Orientation for new employees at Mary Kay was 2 weeks. And there was the Mary Kay way. And it guided everything that we said and did or didn't do. And you mentioned the visible consequences. Absolutely. As a labor and employment lawyer, corporate counsel for Mary Kay, sometimes decisions not to promote someone or to really invite someone to go find happiness someplace else really was about, did they live up to the Mary Kay way? And everybody understood what that was. You either you lived the Mary Kay way or you didn't. And if you didn't, then you weren't necessarily embracing the culture. But I love the fact that you're not, that Bechtel's not being prescriptive, right? That you're leaving enough wiggle room for people to come and be their authentic selves. And I oftentimes am concerned about when speakers out there say, hey, go and be your authentic self without more, right? Because absolutely, you should be genuine and mean what you say and say what you mean and live up to the person that you claim to be, right? But I think it's be your authentic self, but also know what the rules of engagement are. wherever you are in your workplace, right? I'm a feisty Latina, but I can't show up feisty all day, every day, wherever I go. That's not smart. That's not strategic. I'm not setting myself up for success if I'm going to be feisty all day long. So I need to understand what the rules of engagement are, which is why mentors are so important. And even more important are those career sponsors. And I think that's a game changer where we really need to, it's an opportunity for Hispanics and people of color. We all have mentors. That's awesome. What we need are career sponsors. These are the people that advocate for you. They put you in the right place at the right time in front of the right people and afford you stretch opportunities. I have a career sponsor that has aspirations for me that I don't even have for myself. How awesome is that? So I think it's, yes, be your authentic self, know the rules of engagement, and earn your right to have a career sponsor, somebody that's going to advocate for you inside the workplace and outside of the workplace.
Great. So we have just a few minutes left. So we have one last question that is actually to both of you. As CEOs, how do you balance the demands of your work and your families and your personal lives? And then what advice would you give to your employees and members to do the same?
Raquel, you want to go first? I'm happy to let you go first on this one, and I can close it out if you want.
And you'll close it out. What personal life? No, I'm just kidding. I live and breathe SHPE and I have for the last 3.5 years. I'm also a little controversial when it comes to the whole work-life balance. I don't think there's such a thing. I think it's counterbalancing. I think it's a series of trade-offs. And you have to do what you need to do when you need to do it. And sometimes that's going to mean focusing on work. And then that means, something else is going to suffer. And, you don't want to suffer, you don't want it to suffer too severely, like completely neglecting your family. But sometimes you're going to have to focus on work and get it done because that's what needs to happen at that moment in time. And so I think it's a counterbalance. And I think a friend of mine said it's a series of trade-offs. I absolutely believe that. And I think it is important to take care of yourself and make sure that you're carving out time to do that. I wake up super early. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning to read and meditate and make and drink my coffee and go work out. And that's how I start my day. I schedule that time for myself. And that helps set me up for the day. And it puts me in the right frame of mind as I navigate my day. But I think it's a counterbalance and not so much. I don't think you'll ever achieve 100% balance. But that's my 2 cents.
That was such a helpful lead-in because so the best career. So I'm a millennial. I got it by 1 year. So I'm at the older end of the millennial crowd, and a famous Bechtel project or president and COO gave me career advice when I was coming back from grad school, and I was sort of said something about work-life balance, and he said, you millennials, you have it all wrong. You think it's a 50-50 balance, and if you're ever at 51-49, you get all flustered about it. And because he was an engineer, he explained to me in engineering terms, which may resonate with some of you. Don't think about trying to achieve perfect 50-50 balance because it's not achievable in the real world. Mm-hmm. Think about life as a sinusoidal wave with valleys and troughs, where you might be out of balance either towards your professional needs or your family needs. It could be that you get a really great assignment opportunity that requires you to go away for an 8-week on, 2-week off rotation, but you got to chase that steep learning curve and the professional development that helps you get ahead. Then, in a few years, kids might become part of your family, or you might have a family member who's sick and you can't go abroad and live in a construction camp. And the thing that employers have to do, which we're learning to do a better job at Bechtel, is be able to offer you that full range of opportunity based on whatever your personal priorities and constraints may be. That's part of how, by the way, we become a more diverse and inclusive company. We're not used to thinking that way. We're learning to think that way. And now, again, this guy was a really hardcore engineer. And so the way he thought about it, so if you have the sinusoidal wave of being in and out of balance, he said the important thing is that over time, over the long term, the regression line that you plot against that sinusoidal wave, that the slope and direction of the line is approximately in line with what you hope for. So I don't know if that helps for any of the engineers in the crowd, but I do think don't stress yourself out by thinking it has to be perfect. It's not perfect. It's hard. It's really hard. Who you choose to be with as a partner in your life is a really important choice that enables that. The final tactical advice I would say is that, if you're someone who chooses to get married, and if you're lucky enough and want to choose to have children someday, it gets harder. And so if you want to go chase a really steep learning curve that requires relocation or long work hours, my advice would be do it while you're young and single, and don't have a bunch of other family commitments, because it gets harder later. But I think that's just, I couldn't agree with you, Raquel, more in terms of the real world of being ambitious and trying to advance one's career. It's just, it takes hard work.
Yeah.
So with
thank
that,
you both so
I'll just close and hand it back. Raquel, I would just say thank you for the invitation to come and spend the time with you and with all of the SHPE members, who I hope are getting really excited for the convention. And I know it's a little bit of a disappointment maybe that it's virtual, but you know what? It allows more people to participate. And I'm just, I'm so thrilled to be with you all in whatever way is possible in this crazy year that we've got. So thank you, Raquel and SHPE, for the invitation, for the many years of partnership, for what you're doing to help us be a better employer of Hispanic and Latinx engineers. So we're so pumped to be your partner. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This has been fantastic, and hopefully one day soon we'll get to break bread. And I will thank you in person. But this has been a most enjoyable conversation. I know I learned a lot, and I expect that our viewers did too. And so no doubt we all wish we could be in person in Denver, but you are absolutely right. We are having a greater impact because we've gone virtual. So thank you, Kellie, thank you, Claudia, and of course, thank you, Brendan, and thank you to all of Bechtel for your support of SHPE. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.